Hello, welcome to the Brain Scrub, a somewhat improvised approach to mental health. My name is Glenn Sollers, and thanks for tuning in today. They say one should do something that scares the shit out of you every day, and this podcast that I'm doing today, this episode, does scare the shit out of me, and I'll let you know why. This week's been a struggle for me. My son alienated for 7 years. I have not seen him. Father's Day just passed by. His birthday is next week. He'll be 21. The last time I had any meaningful interaction with him was probably at around the age of 13 and 14, and then things went sideways. And that's why I say meaningful conversation, because when he decided not to live with me anymore is the time where I noticed he was no longer being who he normally was. And I suspect I know why. And this struggle has made me very sad this entire week, for the most part. And I learned this technique from a therapist a while ago around, if you want to uncover what might be going on, is to set up 2 chairs, sitting in one chair, and then talking to the other chair like the other individual is there and you're having a conversation with them. And then you can switch chairs and be the other person and then talk back to you like you're them having a conversation with you. And I did that this morning because I felt I needed to reach out to my son. So I had a conversation with him, sitting in the other chair, and I started noticing myself rocking back and forth, which I used to do when I was a kid. When I was scared, I would rock back and forth, and that was my nervous tendency. I started doing that, and then I said something to the effect of, "You have made me afraid of you." Whoa, did that hit me really hard, because I started putting all these dots together in how I've been being with this situation in many respects, and what he was kind of trained to do, in my opinion, from what I know of his mother. And this is not to point fingers at anybody, it's just to learn from this and to discover, because it made me realize that I perhaps have been coming from a place of fear in a lot of situations in my life, and especially in this situation here, where he used threats to keep me away. As an example, when he was 14, he said, "Dad, if you come to my hockey game again to watch me play, I will not see you for a very long time." I listened to him. I respected his boundaries. I respected what he wanted. And there was other threats that came through as well. "If you come by my house, I will call the police." This threatening nature, which made me very afraid. And I was very afraid of his mother as well, cowardly at times. I wouldn't stand up for myself out of fear of what's going to happen. And I really connected with that I am fearful of kind of like the worst case scenario. Perhaps this was used because my ex knew me very well. Let's scare your father. Let's threaten him. And I have been threatened that I was going to lose my son if I didn't follow rules, that you're not going on vacation if you don't let me talk to my son every day. All these things came at me, and I didn't stand up for myself. I wasn't assertive. I stand up for myself in my work environment, but when it comes to my personal life, and maybe this is what was role modeled to me when I was younger, is that be afraid, don't stand up for yourself, there's going to be hell to pay. This fear of worst case scenario thinking or people following through on their threats has held me back. And it got me wondering, maybe I'm not trying hard enough to see my son. Maybe I'm not role modeling courage. I don't know. But it opened up a can of worms around how they have managed to really tie into my fear, and I've fallen for it, and I've been a coward in some ways, but also not to beat myself up. I believe I've done the right thing. I haven't given up. I've tried hard. I've looked for solutions. I tried to negotiate. I tried to problem solve. I went to see counselors. I spoke to friends. I've built my expertise on this subject area, and I'm doing what the experts say you should be doing. So that's not necessarily being a coward. That is actually being courageous, being thoughtful, being objective. I built a lot of self-awareness. I learned from this experience in terms of what I did do and what I didn't do. And why am I fearful of trying more? Why am I fearful of continuing to try to reach out? People will threaten. That happens. People sometimes threaten divorce. People threaten they're going to leave you. People threaten that they're going to take something away. And I've done that before. I've threatened divorce with my current wife. And it comes out of a place of fear. If you think about, if you feel like something's not going your way and you don't know how to work through it, I may resort to a threat. Others may resort to a threat. And generally it's a threat. And some people will follow through on these things. But I know for me, when I threaten this stuff, it is a way to get attention. It is a way for me to say, please listen to me. Whatever is going on right now is not working. And therefore, I'm going to utilize threats because hopefully that's going to work. And it does take both individuals to a fear perspective. So I create fear out of a place of fear. Now, I hope that makes sense to you around the power of fear in getting what we want so that we feel safe, understood, and know that there's a consequence based a lot on how we witness threats. And I've seen threats unfold in my family of origin and my lived experiences. So I became hypervigilant. I became very cautious. I better do what is being told. I need to follow this through. I need to make sure that I respect somebody's threats. However, in many cases, a threat is just a threat. There is not necessarily going to be a follow-through. This morning was an enlightenment moment for me where I started to get, in a lot of this situation, I've been running away based on fear of reprisal, fear of things getting worse. And I'm the only one who's suffering. I'm sure my son is suffering to a certain extent because I did hear him on a podcast that he did recently, and I vowed I wouldn't listen to his podcast, but he said in it that he and his mother have had a very rocky relationship, and he once told me that he's afraid of his mother. And it's a rough relationship. It's still rough, but it used to be a lot rougher. And maybe there's some fear going on for him. Because again, if we threaten people, obviously there's a fear going on for ourselves. Otherwise, why would we threaten people? We would just probably say, you know what? We need to work through this. We need to figure things out. We need to talk about this. Because threats are so damaging. It's manipulative. It is underhanded. It is almost to a point of being evil, playing games. Not mentally safe for both sides in using threats. And I think that a lot of times a threat is used because of a certain insecurity somebody may have about themselves, about the situation. It's kind of like a panic move that you make, getting the attention, but it can be very, very thoughtless. And the damage can be irreversible. The damage of my son threatening for me not to go to his hockey game has caused so much pain for me. So much pain. I got friends' advice around what should I do, and they said, well, you know what, Glenn, listen to him. And in hindsight, I shouldn't have listened to him. I should have just gone for it and not fallen victim to threats that are thrown my way when I have never been violent or abusive. And of course, I've had my arguments. I've had my discussions. I've asserted my opinion. I've yelled. I've sworn. When one is threatened like me, and you know deep inside that you are not a threatening person, it hurts. It hurts a lot. So it has done a lot of damage to me. It's a loss of my identity as a great father, as somebody who genuinely cares. And my son's living into that. And he's learning, if you want to get something in life, threaten it. And that's what I witnessed in my previous relationship. She did what she did for a reason. And I'm not trying to wrong her. We just learn to do certain things based on what we've learned. But if somebody could actually have a conversation with others that use these things and say, you know what, that's not working. Get some coaching. Understand, where does it come from? Why do you use threats? Why do you use manipulation? What is the impact? What are the pros of it? What are the cons of it? What is it creating between two parties? What happens when you don't follow through and you just keep on threatening? What's the consequence of that? I think we need to have some deeper conversations of that, because fear does motivate people, for sure. Like the fact that when I was talking to my son this morning, my imaginary son there sitting in the chair, I started rocking back and forth, which I've done ever since I was a kid. So I have this way of being when I'm in a state of fear. My body's telling me by rocking, there's something you are afraid of. Let me fast forward. Okay, I had that thing happen this morning. I get it. Went for a nice hike with a good friend of mine, and I shared this is what's going on. And then I said, I don't know what to do. Am I trying hard enough? And I said, what I'm currently doing is I'm trying to reach out once every half a year or so, and I'm going to plan on reaching out to my son when he's 25, so he's a bit older, and then hopefully he's not afraid of talking to me or reaching out to me, because I can imagine right now, based on this environment that I know of, because I was in that environment and the environment that he might be in right now, and I'm just speculating, that he likely doesn't want to take action because of fear. Fear of whatever. I don't know what he's going through, okay? And I have to have some compassion for that. But I was thinking, I'm going to wait till he's 25, because by that point in time, he might be ready to have a conversation. But that's not right. And my friend talked me through this and gave me support and said, well, you know what, Glenn, maybe you just need to write a letter to him. It sounds like you reaching out every half year is the right thing to do. Let him know that you still love him, that your doors are open. Don't blame him for anything. Be that person, essentially, and I just got this now as I'm sharing this, that doesn't use threats or doesn't lay guilt trips on people, because I've experienced that too, like a guilt trip. You're the problem. Look what you're doing to your child. You're only focusing on you. You don't care about them. Like, these are things that were untrue, but he heard them. And that's another manipulation tactic, that I'm going to make you feel guilty for who you are based on what my beliefs are, because the way you are right now is inappropriate. Now, we all have a different way of seeing the world, and that's fine. But sometimes we project our own insecurities onto others and then make them the problem. And then, if you think about fear, fear is almost like feeling guilty for being who you are. So you're afraid to be who you are. And I've seen this happen with people. They're afraid to speak up. I've been like that, afraid to share what's going on because I feel guilt. I've been made to feel guilty. And of course I take that on. So I'm actually responsible for that I'm not acceptable as I am. So if we're not doing what we know and feel is the right thing to do for us, our authentic selves, we're actually fearing who we are. We're fearing ourselves. And that that whole connection this morning came up as well. Because sometimes I fear what I'm going to say, or I fear just being myself because I have a history of, Glenn, what you do and who you are and how you are with people is wrong. This has come from certain individuals that have been important in my life. And I've taken it seriously, like from my father, from my mom, from my ex-wife, from my current wife, and I could go on. And yes, I do the same thing to other people at times. I'm not innocent. But then I can begin to fear being who I am, being outspoken, being courageous in what I do, out of what I believe may be the wrong thing to do. So I don't follow my heart all the time. And you could say I kind of wimp out, that I could have tried harder. Yeah, I could have tried harder. What's next? What's next is for me to reach out to my son on a regular basis. Find different ways of reaching out to him. What I'm doing right now is not working. There's no response. And that's okay. But if I can role model, don't give up on what you love. Don't give up on what you value. Don't give up on passion. Don't give up on the right thing in a healthy way, in a way that's not persistent or blaming or threatening or shaming. Just letting people know that you're important to me, and I look forward to the day that we can work through things and love each other and be with each other. Think about people in your life that maybe you have some friction with right now. What fear is at play for you? What fear is at play for them? Why might they be doing what they're doing? Why are you doing what you're doing? The main thing is what is the underlying fear? And sometimes it's fear of success. We are afraid of success. It could be fear of failure. It could be fear of reprisal. I don't know. But if you don't try it, you'll never know. And then clean up the mess afterwards if something does happen. What's the worst that could happen if I keep on trying to reach out to my son? I don't know. I haven't seen him for 7 years. I don't think it can get much worse than this. Because if we're afraid, that causes stress. So break through those fears. Do it anyway. Try something that scares you every day, and we can really learn from that. Thanks for listening.